In the 1970s, a handsome, articulate young man moved through college campuses and suburban neighborhoods across America. He was charming, educated, and seemed destined for success. Women found him attractive. People trusted him. But behind the smile was one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. A man who murdered at least 30 young women and possibly many more. This is the story of Ted Bundy, the charming psychopath who changed how we think about evil. Theodore Robert Cowell was born on November 24, 1946, at a home for unwed mothers in Burlington, Vermont. His mother, Eleanor Louise Cowell, was 22 and unmarried, a source of deep shame in 1940s America. The identity of Ted's father was never confirmed. Eleanor listed a salesman named Lloyd Marshall on the birth certificate, but the truth remained murky. This question of identity would haunt Bundy his entire life. To avoid scandal, Eleanor's parents raised Ted as their own son, telling him his mother was his sister. They moved to Philadelphia, where Ted grew up believing a lie about his own identity. When he eventually discovered the truth as a teenager, the revelation devastated him. Some psychologists believe this foundational betrayal, the lie about who he was, planted the seeds of rage that would later explode into violence. Even as a child, there were warning signs. At age 3, Ted's aunt woke to find him placing kitchen knives around her body while she slept. She recalled him smiling at her when she discovered what he'd done. Bundy also became obsessed with violent imagery, searching through trash cans for detective magazines and pornography. But outwardly, he seemed normal, quiet, shy, but otherwise unremarkable. The monster was learning to hide. As a teenager, Bundy felt like an outsider. He was intelligent but socially awkward, watching his peers with envy and resentment. At the University of Washington, he finally found confidence, and his first serious girlfriend, Stephanie Brooks. She was beautiful, sophisticated, from a wealthy family. She represented everything Bundy wanted to be. When she broke up with him in 1968, citing his lack of ambition and direction, Bundy was crushed. That rejection would echo through his future crimes in horrifying ways. Bundy reinvented himself. He became politically active in the Republican Party, worked at a crisis hotline alongside future crime writer Ann Rule, and enrolled in law school. He projected success, confidence, and charm. When he reconnected with Stephanie Brooks in 1973, she was impressed by his transformation. They briefly dated again. But Bundy's interest wasn't romantic. It was revenge. Once he'd won her back, he coldly dumped her, just as she'd done to him. It was a calculated act of retribution, and it wasn't enough. On February 1st, 1974, 21-year-old Linda Ann Healy disappeared from her basement apartment near the University of Washington. Her bed was neatly made, but blood stained the pillow and nightgown left behind. She simply vanished. Police had no leads, no witnesses, no body. Bundy had been meticulous, but Linda wasn't his first victim. Investigators would later discover he'd been attacking women since at least 1973. She was simply the first disappearance that drew public attention. Through the spring and summer of 1974, young women began disappearing across Washington state. All were attractive, with long brown hair parted in the middle, all resembling Stephanie Brooks, Donna Gale Manson, Susan Rancourt, Roberta Kathleen Parks, Brenda Ball, Jorgen Hawkins. The similarities were impossible to ignore. Someone was hunting a specific type of woman, and he was getting away with it. July 14, 1974, Lake Sammamish State Park. Thousands of people enjoyed the sunny Sunday afternoon. Among them was Ted Bundy, his arm in a fake sling, approaching young women for help loading his sailboat. Janice Ott agreed to help. She was never seen alive again. Hours later, Denise Naslund also disappeared from the same park. Multiple witnesses described the handsome man calling himself Ted. It was Bundy's first major mistake. Being seen, being remembered. Police received thousands of tips. Among them, multiple people, including Bundy's girlfriend Liz Kendall and former co-worker Ann Rule, called in his name. But Bundy seemed too normal, too articulate, too respectable. He was a law student, a crisis hotline volunteer. How could someone like that be a serial killer? This cognitive dissonance would protect Bundy repeatedly. We expect monsters to look like monsters. In the fall of 1974, Bundy moved to Salt Lake City to attend law school at the University of Utah. The disappearances in Washington slowed, but almost immediately, young women began vanishing in Utah. Melissa Smith, Laura Amy, Deborah Kent. The pattern had shifted geographically, but the method remained the same. Bundy was refining his technique, becoming bolder and more confident with each successful abduction. November 8, 1974. Carol DeRanch was shopping at a mall in Murray, Utah, when a man claiming to be a police officer approached her. He said her car had been broken into and asked her to accompany him to the station. Once in his vehicle, he attempted to handcuff her. Carol fought back desperately, managing to escape from the car. She'd survived an encounter with Ted Bundy, and her testimony would eventually help convict him. On August 16, 1975, a Utah highway patrolman noticed a VW Beetle driving suspiciously through a residential neighborhood at 2:30 a.m. When the driver fled, the officer pursued. Inside the car, handcuffs, a ski mask, rope, an ice pick, and other tools of abduction. The driver was Ted Bundy. He claimed the items were innocent, but Carol DeRanch identified him in a lineup. In 1976, Bundy was convicted of aggravated kidnapping and sentenced to 15 years in prison. While imprisoned in Utah, Bundy was charged with the murder of Corinne Campbell in Colorado. Authorities transferred him to Aspen to stand trial. Bundy, ever confident, chose to represent himself in court, a decision that would give him access to the law library and, crucially, opportunities to escape. For Bundy, it was never about proving innocence. It was about control, manipulation, and testing his own cleverness against the system. June 7, 1977. During a court recess, Bundy asked to visit the courthouse law library. Once alone, he jumped from a second-story window and escaped into the Colorado mountains. For 6 days, he remained free, living in the wilderness. He broke into cabins, stole food and clothing, and evaded police. Eventually, exhaustion and poor planning caught up with him. He was recaptured driving a stolen car. But the escape had proven something to Bundy. He could outwit them, and he would try again. December 30th, 1977. Bundy had been secretly dieting, losing weight to squeeze through a small opening. Over months, he'd sawed through the ceiling of his cell. That night, while guards thought he was sleeping, Bundy crawled through the ceiling into the jailer's apartment and walked out the front door. By the time authorities discovered his absence 17 hours later, Bundy was on a plane to Chicago, then a bus to Florida. He was free again, and he still had murder on his mind. January 15th, 1978, Tallahassee, Florida. Just after 2 a.m., Bundy entered the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University through an unlocked door. Over the next 15 minutes, he moved through the house in a frenzy of violence. Margaret Bowman was strangled and beaten to death in her bed. Lisa Levy suffered the same fate. Karen Chandler and Kathy Kleiner were savagely attacked but survived. The brutality was unprecedented in Bundy's known crimes. Savage, frenzied, almost animalistic. On February 9, 1978, 12-year-old Kimberly Leach disappeared from her Lake City, Florida middle school. Unlike Bundy's previous victims, Kimberly was a child, not a college student. Her body was found 8 weeks later in an abandoned pig shed. The murder of Kimberly Leach represented a new level of depravity. Bundy was no longer following his pattern. He was devolving, losing control. It would be his last murder. On February 15, 1978, a Pensacola police officer noticed a VW Bug driving erratically. When he ran the plates, the car came back stolen. The driver gave multiple false names before finally admitting, "I'm Ted Bundy." After 2 escapes and a cross-country flight, his run was over. Florida had the death penalty, and the evidence against him was overwhelming. This time, there would be no escape. Bundy's trials became media sensations, among the first to be televised nationally. Bundy represented himself, cross-examining witnesses, delivering opening statements, playing to the cameras. He was charming, articulate, seemingly reasonable. Women sent him love letters. Some people couldn't believe this intelligent, handsome man could be a killer. But the evidence was damning. A bite mark on Lisa Levy's body matched Bundy's teeth perfectly. Eyewitnesses placed him at multiple crime scenes. July 24, 1979. The jury convicted Ted Bundy of the Chi Omega murders. The judge addressing Bundy said something remarkable. "You're a bright young man. You'd have made a good lawyer. But you went another way, partner. Take care of yourself." Even in condemnation, people struggled to reconcile Bundy's intelligence and charm with his monstrous crimes. In February 1980, he was convicted of murdering Kimberly Leach. Both verdicts carried the death penalty. On death row, Bundy maintained his innocence for years. But as execution approached, he began confessing. Slowly, methodically, using his knowledge as leverage for delays. He confessed to 30 murders across 7 states, though investigators believe the true number was much higher. He described his crimes in chilling detail, speaking about his victims as objects, not people. Even in confession, Bundy sought control and attention. What made Ted Bundy kill? Psychologists have debated this for decades. He showed classic signs of psychopathy: lack of empathy, superficial charm, grandiosity, manipulation. He blamed pornography in a final interview, but experts largely dismiss this as manipulation. The truth seems more complex: a combination of genetic predisposition, early childhood trauma, narcissism, and rage, particularly toward women who rejected him. He wasn't insane. He was calculated, purposeful, and utterly without conscience. Bundy shattered comfortable assumptions about evil. He wasn't a loner living in his mother's basement. He wasn't obviously disturbed or socially incompetent. He had relationships, friends, a career trajectory. He volunteered at a suicide prevention hotline, literally saving lives while taking others. This cognitive dissonance is Bundy's most disturbing legacy: the realization that predators don't always look like predators. Evil can wear a friendly face. Bundy courted publicity and got it. His trials were media circuses, drawing groupies who attended daily wearing their best clothes, hoping to catch his eye. He received hundreds of love letters from women who refused to believe he was guilty. The press labeled him handsome and charismatic in ways they'd never describe other killers. Some feminists criticized the coverage, noting that Bundy's victims were often reduced to footnotes in the story of his supposed brilliance. Perhaps no one had a more complicated relationship with Bundy than Ann Rule. They worked together at a suicide crisis hotline in the early 1970s. She considered him a friend, someone she trusted and admired. When she began researching a book about the local murders, she never suspected her friend Ted. Even when his name came up as a suspect, she initially defended him. The betrayal she felt when the truth emerged was profound. Her book, The Stranger Beside Me, remains one of the most insightful accounts of Bundy, written by someone who knew both the mask and the monster. January 24th, 1989. Outside Florida State Prison, crowds gathered, some protesting capital punishment, others celebrating with signs reading, "Burn Bundy, burn." Inside at 7:16 a.m., Theodore Robert Bundy was executed in the electric chair. His last words were to his mother: "I'd like you to give my love to my family and friends." There was no apology to victims' families, no final confession of remorse. Even in death, Bundy remained focused on himself. It's crucial to remember that Ted Bundy's story is really the story of at least 30 young women whose lives were stolen. Linda Ann Healy, Donna Gale Manson, Susan Rancourt, Kimberly Leach, and so many others, some never identified. They were daughters, sisters, friends. They had dreams, ambitions, futures. They weren't props in Bundy's narrative. They were human beings who deserved long, full lives. Their names deserved to be spoken more than his. Bundy's case transformed American criminal justice. It demonstrated that serial killers could be intelligent, attractive, and socially competent, overturning earlier assumptions. The FBI developed more sophisticated profiling techniques, partly in response to cases like Bundy's. Law enforcement learned to coordinate better across state lines. Universities implemented better campus security. The case showed that stranger danger was real, and that predators actively study and exploit our tendency to trust people who seem normal. Ted Bundy wanted to be remembered as brilliant, as special, as someone who outsmarted everyone. But the truth is simpler and more important. He was a serial killer who caused immeasurable suffering to dozens of families. His intelligence made him more dangerous, not more interesting. His charm was a tool for murder, not a redeeming quality. The lesson of Ted Bundy isn't about his psychology or his cleverness. It's about the importance of believing victims, trusting our instincts, and understanding that evil doesn't always announce itself. This was the story of Ted Bundy. May we remember his victims, not his legacy.